Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Leaders in Supply Chain and Logistics podcast. I'm your host, Stéphanie Moles-Rota, Managing Director of Arnoud Global, Benelux and France. So today on the podcast in Value Chain, I have the pleasure to speak to Arnoud Buizer, who's Chief Supply Chain Officer at Interfood. So Arnoud joined Interfood a year ago. Arnoud holds a master's degree in mechanical engineering from the Delft University of Technology. Before joining Interfood, Arnoud worked in various international roles in supply chain management with ExxonMobil, Ray-Dalco, and most recently Cargill. Arnoud focuses on optimizing our global supply chain operation to ensure top quality services for suppliers and customers. So Arnoud, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it is really a super. I looked at Interfood and I looked at your career, and there's so many things to be said. But let's start by the beginning. What were some of the inflection points in your career that really made you who you are today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I perhaps had my first real big inflection point at a relatively young age when I was around 20, because until that moment I always wanted to become a farmer, and clearly I failed miserably in that mission. And the reason for me not becoming a farmer is really the insight that I'm a very social person and like very diverse environments. And I felt sometimes a bit lonely on the farm, even though it was a nice farm. And I decided to not become a farmer. To aim my arrows at the bigger world, and that's how I decided to start studying at the Delft University of Technology, and explore the world.
Very nice. So does your family come from farming?
Yeah, my family comes from farming, and so it's, you could argue, not a coincidence that I work for Cargill and I'm now working for Interfood. Actually, that is a coincidence, but it's a very nice coincidence, because you can move the boy from the farm, but you never remove the farm from the boy.
Oh, I love it.
So that's and then it's really nice to work in an environment where you still are very close to your heart.
For sure. Any other key changes in your life that made you who you are?
Yes, it's actually funny because you rightfully pointed out that I have a career in supply chain management, but that was not for me something that I deliberately choose to work in. It was more like a coincidence. When I started working at Exxon, I was initially working really as a process engineer, and you focus on your refinery part, and then you really think everything is around that piece of equipment. And then I was asked to move to London to prepare the shopping list for the traders. And it was only then that I really realized how big the world is in terms of a supply chain end-to-end process, and how you can really influence the profitability and the direction a company is taking by really the overall chain. And that really opened my eyes. And from that moment on, my roles have always been in supply chain or supply chain related activities. And I think it is also really important to give people in a company the experience and challenge them to think wider than the walls of their own backyard. And because it brings value, it makes the job much more interesting, and it brings value so with that value for the individual, but also for the company. And yeah, it's also that, if you're running a supply chain, it can sometimes be a bit like Groundhog Day. It's a famous movie where a reporter is repeatedly living the same day. And although I love supply chain, I think many of my colleagues will recognize that sometimes you find yourself and you say, damn, this is exactly the same as a couple of years ago. And I had that moment at Cargill, and that was also the moment that I discussed with my boss at the time, the managing director of a big unit in Cargill. Say, okay, there's a lot of experience that you can build on from having been responsible for a supply chain. You see many directions from commercial point of view where the company should go to, but ultimately we're all looking at the same assets. We're looking at the same footprint, and is that footprint really suited for the direction that we want to take? And at that time, this is like 8 years ago. I decided to investigate that with a very small team. My boss supported me in that, and guess what? The conclusion was, well, actually, no. If you put everything holistically together, then guess what? We need to change a couple of things, and that is also an inflection point that you need to own your career. You need to own what is happening to you, and sometimes it needs a Groundhog Day moment. But I would advise everybody to be slightly ahead of that and really own it and be proactive about it. And typically you grow yourself much more with that, and also the business that you're working in.
For sure. And actually, I saw that your current CEO started in supply chain. And I think we discussed already a couple of times, but I think the future of the CEO of tomorrow will be very strong if they have experienced supply chain and vice versa. So the holistic view of the business is so critical. Looking at your career, so you've worked for a very large company, and now you work for a 3 billion. I read some article calling it a small multinational, very interesting business. So what are the things you learn in a very big company, in the manufacturing environment, for example, and the things you learn now, today?
Well, there is differences for sure. And I think what I'm going to say now is in the context of really having enjoyed the environment of a big company, whether it was Exxon or Cargill alike. Having said that, there is sometimes a bit of a thing that comes with these big structures, and that is a speed of implementation and stakeholder management. So I think if anything in a big corporate, by being successful in implementing change, what you learn is stakeholder management. What you also learn is to be patient. And can't say that is my biggest trait, but you learn it whether you like it or not. And that's also, if you contrast that with a smaller company like Interfood, a huge difference. The things that I've been working on the past year at Interfood have, that would have taken years to get implemented in Cargill, and that's obviously, it's logical because the context is completely different, but that makes it also very, engaging and to be honest, just plain fun to work in a slightly smaller company where you can have much more direct impact.
Love it. Yeah, I think that's the dream of a lot of people who've had that great experience in the past and now, can really steer and be at the decision making. So, and any special advice, because we talk, obviously, we talk to talents in supply chain. So this podcast is really meant also to inspire others. What do you think make great talents? How do you choose your talent? What makes great talent in value chain?
I think the biggest thing I'm looking for is attitude. It's assuming that you have the checkbox of education, of experiences. I think the most important is attitude. And then what I specifically mean is a growth mindset. And so to challenge yourself, to have multiple perspectives, to look for new and different ways to tackle problems, to be curious and not settle with the status quo. I think that is very important. I think what is also very important is to be able to decomplexify things. And it's perhaps the link with the start of my career, what we were just discussing. Is, and I mean it with the full respect possible, but I would say think like a farmer and keep things simple, and make sure that you find people that can nurture the right conditions. And if you have that, then I think you can move mountains. And it's a nice, perhaps, reflection linking back to the inflection points that we started the discussion with. Is I have a personal inflection point when it comes to the birth of my first son, my oldest son. I have 4 sons in the meantime, but my oldest one was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, and cystic fibrosis is an inherited disease that you ultimately die from, and that was 16 years ago. And that puts you back on the ground. It really taught me that you can lean forward, you can think you can do many things, but actually there's nothing you can do. At least at the time there was nothing I could do, and it forced me to lean back and really think, okay, I cannot influence what happened to me, but I can influence what I do with it. And together with a friend of mine, we started a charity, and that charity is called Skate for Air. And being a Dutch farmer, I love ice speed skating, and that is a yearly event on the Austrian Weissensee, where we participate with a group of people. And basically, Skate for Air facilitates that people can go there, can skate, have a great time, and as a return, we ask them to raise funds. And in the past 10 years that we are running that charity, we raised over 4 million euros. And
wow.
Just to say that, I would have never been able to get that done by leaning in too hard. And that's, I think, very important. So coming back to your question, what makes great talent? I think great talent are people that have the right balance between sometimes leaning back and not doing anything, and sometimes being really pushy and really challenging. And it's the mix, I think. So it's not a black and white answer, Stephanie.
It is good to hear. So I'm just going to recap a few things we mentioned. I mean, at the beginning, you mentioned also for the very large companies, the stakeholder management, the patience. That comes back to the leaning back, right? Because without patience, no matter, I think a lot of people, myself included, don't have that, or need to learn to be patient. To be patient. I love the attitude thing, because a lot of things you can teach, especially when it comes to hard skills, the soft skills, it is difficult. It is much more difficult to change and to teach. So think like a farmer, lean back, have that balance between bouncing back. What do you do when you have a really challenging situation? And I will for sure look at Skate for Air. So you have to share that with us, definitely. And then at the same time, push. So push enough when you need to push. We discussed it separately, but if you don't push, you don't know if you actually achieve the limit and push the organization to the next level.
Yeah.
So what would you tell your younger self? If you look back at this career, I mean, this is not done, but you've gone privately and business-wise pretty far. What would you tell that 20-year-old kid that decided not to be a farmer? What would you advise?
I would tell him no doesn't exist.
Okay.
And so if there's no pushback, you're just not aiming high enough. That's for one very important element. And I also think very important is that it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to fail, because rather than what the direct suggestion is that failure is, I see it as a prerequisite to be successful, and it's the opposite. failure. It's success. But you need to learn from it. You need to use it to learn to become successful. And it is that curiosity. Be curious. Never think that you know it. Ask, and also allow yourself to have completely opposite perspectives when you look at problems, and really work with others. That's also very important. Don't think that you have to do it by yourself, but build strong networks that you can rely on, that you can feed, but that can also feed you.
Great. So network, failure, the power of failure, even though it's painful.
Yeah,
but that's the only
painful,
way.
Yeah, it's the only way. It's and I think that is an undervalued training.
100%. 100%. Do you have any tip? I find it difficult sometimes, right? I need to bounce back. So obviously, sometimes I go for a walk, sometimes I just listen to meditate. But what do you do? Because sometimes failure can really hurt.
Yeah, I'm a very simple guy. I just need to hurt myself even more with sport. And I love cycling. I love ice speed skating, and that are fantastic sports to really get into the flow of your body and your mind in complete zen. And that really helps me to sort of in the background reflect and also create new ideas on how to course correct a perceived failure into something that is positive.
And how is your son doing?
Oh, well, my son is doing fantastic. And so he's the biggest issues we now have are really the typical puberty issues. So that's fantastic.
That's good news.
Great discussion. So now he's doing great, because with that 4 million, we managed to really accelerate research, which is of course, fantastic. I mean, I cannot, and we never did it for my son, but because of my son. But due to that accelerated research, also my son has a big benefit from that medication that is now available. But yeah, so that's all going well, and no, I think it's important. That's perhaps my closing remark, is that I think supply chain is really about connecting. It's about learning. It's about dealing with complexity. It's about managing change. And I think much more the spinal cord of our business context than sometimes we're being given credit for. And I think that's also the opportunity for everybody working in supply chain to create that awareness and to demonstrate the value that you can bring by having a more holistic overview of the business that you're operating in. And so I see a fantastic future for the profession, and a lot of value still to be unlocked.
And the sustainability, we forgot to talk about sustainability, Arnoud.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, talking about challenges,
yes.
It's. I mean, Interfood is, I think, definitely not there yet, but making big strides in helping the industry becoming more green.
Yeah.
And for example, we're having a cooperation with DSM to put an additive in the feed so that the cows are basically burping and farting less, and
okay.
Which makes a huge impact on the CO2 emissions, and next to that, we're also really applying that boots on the ground approach to look at all the elements, whether it's the manure management, the feed, obviously, but also how are you managing your herd, regenerative agriculture, so how are you dealing with the soil, all very important. And we really like to make it very simple. So it's complex, but take a simple approach that is pragmatic and that you take it step by step. And the same we're applying for our logistics. It must be said that in the total end-to-end chain, the logistic emissions are relatively small. So the biggest bang for the buck is really at the farm.
At the farm, yeah.
But also in logistics, it's, I think, important to baseline your emissions, set clear targets, and stand up the governance around it, so that you can really make steps for the better. And it's not, that's also not simple. It's not as straightforward as just electrifying. It's really, you have many different elements that need to be worked on, and that's also the approach that we're taking, that we're not aiming on one big bet, but it's all smaller elements together that can shift the industry from perhaps not so good to much better. And I think that in itself is a universal thing, right? I mean, that approach can be mimicked in other industries as well.
Yes, 100%. It's actually coming back to the future is definitely fantastic. I think supply chain can make a big difference in the world, and being at the heart of supply chain, having that holistic view, challenging, partnering as well. You spoke about teamwork, because all by yourself, you're not going to do it.
No.
And I love the fact that you have that simplicity and that farming passion. I think it helps probably a lot in your current role, talking to the farmer and understanding all those little pieces that add to the puzzle.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
Arnoud, a great pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. And we'll be looking forward to the changes you guys are making and the progress at Interfood.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arnoud.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. If you like what you heard, be sure to go to www.alcottglobal.com and click the podcast button for all the show notes of the interview. Also, subscribe to our mailing list to get our latest update first. If you're listening to a streaming platform like iTunes or Spotify, we would appreciate the kind review. 5-star works best to keep us going and our production team happy, and of course, share it with your friends. I'm most active on LinkedIn, so do feel free to follow me, and if you have any suggestions on what to do or who to invite next, don't hesitate to drop me a note. And if you're looking to hire top executive in supply chain or transform your business, of course, contact us as well to find out how we can help.